How are y'all diddly doing? How's everybody holding up? Welcome to the next episode of I built a historically accurate Sims home in The Sims 4, historically. The last episode was the 1970s home. Thank you all very, very much for your love on that video. That video done really well. I don't think that every single time frame is going to do really well, but I just wanted to do time frames that I'm interested in and just throwing shit at a wall and hoping someone vibes with it. And I think people might vibe with this one, but I think this one's going to be a bit more niche. And this is a historically accurate Tudor home in The Sims 4. Tudors are the bane of my life. No offense to Tudors. I studied Tudors in primary school, obviously, and I studied Tudors in college. And justice for Lady Jane Grey is all I can say and all that. But yeah, Tudors are a bit the bane of my existence. I kind of have an interest in the aesthetics of the time period, but I think I've just been so... I went into my history A-level thinking that Henry VIII had 8 wives because that's what I was taught in primary school. And my sister believed that it was 8 wives as well. I got an A in that exam thinking that Henry VIII had 8 wives. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Where's the other 2? Anyway, it turns out there's 6. But yeah, without further ado, let's get on in, babe. In terms of the outside, like the actual structure of the shell, I usually really struggle with shells. It's probably the bit about the build that I overthink the most. I would say that and landscaping and maybe even roofing I have the most trouble with. But with the shells, I really overthink it. It's hell for me when I try and make a shell of a house, actually. And you can see that in any video that I have where I include me trying to make the shell. Disaster, babe. And with this one, I thought I would struggle more than I did, but I just started placing things and it just kept on working. Boom, 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 boom with the shell. I did change it a little bit as we go on, just as I realised things wouldn't work, etc. But yeah, I thought I'd struggle more, but I didn't. I did do a lot of, well, all of the research that I could do on traditional Tudor house plans. And a lot of the stuff that I could find was either just before the turning point of what made a house a home during that time, or a really upper class version of a Tudor home. And I didn't really want a really upper class version of it. I wanted a normal version of it, but I couldn't really find any. So I had to do a kind of upper middle class version of a Tudor home. I tried to take the plans that already existed and kind of make them smaller. And a lot of things that I've read talked about the E shape of a building, like a building in the shape of an E, which is funny because Henry had a daughter called Elizabeth. Just been the more you know. If I say Tudor style, like 100% people are going to be thinking of Windenburg, for example, has a lot of Tudor styles. Get Together was the perfect pack for this build, actually. She supported me through the entirety of this build. That is where my loyalties lie. But even in real life, the Tudor style home is still really popular. There's so many styles of them where it's like a mock plaster with the beams and everything. So I'm quite acquainted with the style, and this stems from the actual Tudor style build, obviously before bricks and mortar, potentially before the Great Fire of London as well. And it was basically beams with plaster. I'm sure you already know the style, but what I didn't know, I mean, it's not that far of a jump. Like, I'm not shocked by this quote. I just was happy to find it, that the more intricate the beams you had, it was a wealth symbol. So if you had really decorative beams on the outside, you were really, she's a rich bitch. Like, it feels so good to be so young and have this fun and be successful, is what all the Tudor houses were singing at that time. And I really do believe that. Because I wanted to do a middle class, upper middle class version of a Tudor style house, I decided to incorporate that, but not have it really over the top. So underneath the windows is the only place that there's like fancy things with the beams, because obviously they want to show off that they've got a little bit of money, but they don't have enough money like the aristocracy to have X's all around the side of the house and everything. But the Tudor times were actually, they really changed how people live. It was kind of, I've seen it described as a slow change towards being comfortable, just comfort, like pajamas and stuff like that. Obviously they weren't there then, they were not there. Two of the biggest changes during this time for your houses were multi-story homes and also chimneys. This is because before, people lived in basically like a one-room house, right? And humans and also animals shared this place, and it was kind of, it had a bed of straw and only the top layers of straw would be changed, but everybody was sharing it. So there would be piss, there would be beer, there would be like chicken shit on your floor, and you just rake it up and change the top layer of it. And there'd be a fire in the middle of it, there'd be a hole in the roof, and the smoke would escape through the roof, which meant that obviously you couldn't have another floor on top because you needed ventilation for the smoke to go up. Then from the introduction of chimneys, Chimneys obviously have a chimney breast, and the smoke just is encapsulated in the chimney, which meant that they could have second floors, which meant more rooms. However, because people are people, human error will always find a way to just interject any type of semblance of, positivity and growth or anything like that. Chimneys were also a huge cause of death at this time because people didn't really know how to build them properly. They kind of got the idea that you could light a fire in this and the smoke would go up, but also people didn't really know that they kind of needed to be built with brick and they needed to be built in a certain style. You even had people building chimneys out of just wood, which obviously is a fire hazard, and also not cleaning them. Because smoke is just unburnt fuel, which I didn't know that. I was like, I don't know what I thought smoke was, like ethereal type of, like, I don't know. I never knew it was unburnt fuel, which I feel like is primary school level knowledge, but I mean, I thought Henry VIII had 8 wives, so I don't know what my primary school was doing. You'd go to bed and everything, and then because the chimney breasts weren't cleaned on the inside, they would spark, it would catch fire, and then burn all of your family and you while you were sleeping and kill everybody. So that's one way that people died from that, but also another way that people died from that was because they didn't know how to build them properly. They would often collapse and you could be killed by a fallen chimney. You know the Feel It song? What's she gonna look like with a chimney on her? It was about the Tudor times. But one thing that's interesting is because people were just building these chimneys in roundabout ways that were truly inventive, you know what I mean? That's the word for it. It led to some of the first health and safety laws in the UK, which made you regulate how you built your chimney, which is a good thing. And then for the landscaping of this house, I'm really proud of this landscaping. Like I say, I struggle with landscaping, kind of knowing where to put things where, but because I was looking at a lot of reference images that was kind of, I mean, people had already done the work for me, do you know what I mean? It wasn't a direct copy and paste, but I could see there was obviously lots of green, like a brick path going through. So yeah, I kind of put my all into landscaping. Kind of tedious. Honestly, one of the worst things about landscaping in The Sims 4 are these shrub bushes, because they're almost like a half tile placement, but you can't put them next to each other without there being a little gap, which means that you have to use 3 to fill in 2 gaps. It's really annoying. I just wish they were a little bit bigger. That is my pet peeve. I also wanted to incorporate a garden in this build because a lot of Tudor people had gardens, and not for the aesthetics like we have them today. Like, they didn't just have them to look at them and think, oh, that looks pretty, although I'm sure they did. But also they served a real purpose in Tudor life. A lot of people had gardens, whether it's really high up to really low down, or even like community gardens where they could go and pick flowers or plants, because a lot of medicine at this time came from the actual things that you would find in your garden. Not necessarily just like come across, but people would purposefully grow them in the garden. But also, I feel like it's going to be a recurrent theme throughout all of these. This knowledge, I mean, some were good, do you know what I mean? People learned plants really well, but also some of the things from this time, people died because the knowledge wasn't up to scratch. I mean, obviously they didn't, was it this time where they kind of believed that whatever looks like your illness could cure you? So if there was something wrong with your blood, you had to like bathe in blood or something like that. That was then. And then the Victorians had mucus, blood, and I can't remember the third thing. Oh, I can't wait till we go into the Victorian ones, guys. I love history. But yeah, people died. People died left, right, and center. One thing about people, they're always going to die. 2 things you can guarantee in life, darling: death and taxes. So yeah, that's outside. I really enjoyed it. It just came together so seamlessly, which is not something that usually happens with the shells of my build. I'm usually so stuck in my head. I didn't even have anything on, like watching while I was building this. I was just in the zone. I had a great time. Now for the floor plan, and for all the struggles I didn't have on the outside, they kind of came to fruition for the floor plan. I really did try and do my best, but I did find it quite challenging. I think my main issue was because I was taking plans from the aristocracy type of houses during this time and trying to translate them into middle class houses during this time. It was very difficult for me because I didn't really know the type of rooms that were prominent versus the type of rooms that could kind of be left behind. Like, for example, if you're really rich here, you might have 2 living rooms, or you might have a separate place for your washing, whatever that's called, or you might have an ensuite. Someone from the Tudor times, they might look and be like, no, people would really want that ensuite, where I don't have an ensuite, I've only got 1 toilet. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was really struggling to kind of judge what to keep and what not to keep. I did do a lot of research, so I kind of got some idea there, but Tudor times was also a difficult time because there was a change in rooms, obviously, because people used to live in this 1 room thing. And it brought in purposeful rooms that actually served a purpose rather than just a one size fits all. So I tried to do my best. I kept downstairs to what we nowadays would call like a living room. Is it a gallery that they called it? There was a name for it, but it's eluding me and it's really annoying me. That's eluding me. And then we've got the entryway and also a kitchen with a room to the side of it for the workers. Because one thing that I found interesting, if I can get to a period property home, a historic home in the UK with the National Trust, if I can look in one, I will look in one. And a lot of things that you see is the maid's quarters is always separate to the main house, and they always have secret staircases, so they're kind of hidden out of sight. But it didn't always used to be like that. If you worked for the house, you would generally live alongside them. But also, because the Tudor times is a fucking massive period, you know what I mean? They also started to drift away from this. So it was difficult to like place things, specific time period is this from. And then the upstairs, it was originally 3 chambers, but I do turn it into 2 a little bit later on, just because for the size of them, I thought 2 would do better than 3. This is something that I found interesting. Usually now, the best bedroom is kind of, this is your room if it's your house, you know what I mean? And then the guest bedroom might be the smaller room that you don't use. But everything that was reading was the best chamber was reserved for the guests, and it was the better room of the 2. Although a lot of this time is all about showing off. People have always been people, babe, but they're going to try and show off. But yeah, I found that really interesting. So both of these bedrooms have a fireplace too, because obviously there's a fireplace downstairs and I connected it to upstairs. Because chimneys were this new thing on Chimney Breast, people could now have multiple chimneys in one home, which I could only imagine. Oh my God, just going from one room and then all of these rooms with a chimney in each room. But also, as amazing as that sounds, chimneys actually weren't always popular, despite the fact that a fireplace is really, really warm and you can't really sit in front of one for too long. People did complain of the cold, and people also said that they never used to get headaches before fireplaces were introduced, which is interesting. But yeah, obviously going from one big open fire in the middle of a room to fireplaces where the heat was kind of more retained and you could only have access to it if you're directly facing it rather than a full 360 thingy of the heat. People would complain that they were cold, that they didn't provide enough heat. And people would literally take a chair and sit in the hearth to be as close to the fire as possible. Obviously, for massive fireplaces, I couldn't really replicate that in The Sims because all of our fireplaces are like 2 to 3 tiles. But I did try and keep the chimneys accurate. Because in The Sims 4, you don't need a chimney breast. Obviously, every fireplace needs a chimney breast or like some form of flue to get the smoke out. So I kind of built it in around these bricks. It doesn't look 100% accurate. I wish that we could do half walls, but coming from the top down. I feel like that could be a really, really great, or even platforms, but coming from the top down. That could be a really great introduction to the franchise, actually. If we could do that, that would make so many opportunities. I could build the perfect half. But yeah, I try to include it that way at least. And then you might be thinking, for the upstairs, there's this one little room in the corner. What is that, babe? Babe, that's a privy. Basically, now we are so lucky that we get to, you know, sit on a toilet, do our business, flush the chain, and it is none of our business anymore, if you know what I mean. Well, people didn't have running water or toilets back then. I haven't seen this in an actual house, but that's not to say it doesn't exist. And I've heard of them, I just haven't seen them. But yeah, it's basically a hole in the ground, and you kind of sit on top of it, but it's like built within the structure. And do your business, it comes out through a hole in the floor, and then underneath it, like on the outside, actually in the ground floor, is a giant hole. And this has to be dug up, obviously, a lot. This actually has a lot of issues with it because it goes so far into the ground. It kind of can contaminate things, the soil around it. So thank God for running water, do you know what I mean? But yeah, that's one way that people used to go. And I did include the hole in the floor in this build. It goes down several levels. It's not full of shit though. In terms of decorating, I feel like everything I've said so far, it's like this was a struggle for me. Having it be a struggle is not always bad. I kind of like the enjoyment of having to actually figure out where to put things, how to do things, and everything like that. So this one was a struggle for me because it was so different for me. Usually with Sims houses, mine are a little bit more bare than like a really cluttered house. Usually we're like, yeah, we'll put a chair in that corner. Oh, that corner's empty. We'll put a plant. This corner's empty. Let's hang a picture. Oh, this room would look really good with the carpet. Nope, can't do that in Tudor times. But even though I will say the Tudor times were definitely a turning point for home life, things kind of became more permanent in living situations. And this showed in the objects that people had. I found this really interesting. So I love simple facts where I'm just like, oh my goodness, yeah, I've never thought about that. But chests, you know, the ones that the foot of your bed and stuff like that, you open up, put stuff in. We're all aware of chests. They often have a rounded top. And the reason that they have a rounded top is because obviously people were traveling along the road, literally saw Geralt, the path is calling them. But it was curved as to avoid rain, hailstones, snow even, perhaps. So that's why chests usually have a rounded top even to this day. I love that. And then these chests also started to transform as things got more permanent, objects became more permanent. Chests now had drawers in, they weren't being moved about as much. And they became chest of drawers. I love learning about how stuff came to be, guys. It really boggles my mind. Tilts my trumpet. It's all kind of showing in a permanency, especially for the aristocracy, like the really upper class as well, because this is the kind of around the time that family heirlooms became a thing and like objects were being passed down. So the real statement on material objects started to become really apparent. And also in terms of the walls and everything, I really struggled with decorating the walls because I was like, I just want to put some really cute like paneling on here. But the walls are mainly plaster. I did read that they had fabric walls in places. I'm not too sure how, like I couldn't really understand the context of the fabric walls, but apparently they did have fabric walls, but it was mainly plaster, and it was especially plaster in rooms where they were eating because the scent of the food would soak into the fabric. Too true, babe, too true. I did include 2 tapestries in this build, and the tapestry is not actually meant to be tapestry, it's meant to be a carpet because obviously people didn't have carpets back then. They were really fucking expensive actually. So if people got a carpet, did they walk on it? No. Did they put it on the floor? No. They hung it on the wall to show people, or they literally kept them stored away. And when people came around, they'd be like, look at my carpets. Look at my carpets. But yeah, because they were so expensive, they didn't want to ruin them. So it was literally just for people to look at. But apart from that, I found it so difficult to decorate. It just felt so bare. You couldn't just go thrifting for knickknacks in the Tudor period, but it still felt very wrong to me. I was like, I just want to put something pretty in this corner, but I cannot. Especially, this really came to a head where like I was like looking at myself in the reflection of a monitor and I was like, don't do it, bitch. I gotta do it, when I had to delete the lights because, oh, no Tudor home would be as well lit as I had lit this house. So I had to delete the lights. I did put candles everywhere, sconces, because people did use candles. If they wanted to use candles, they had to make sure that all of the windows were closed so the candle wouldn't burn as long and everything. But yeah, windows, it wouldn't be that light. It would not have been that light. Even the windows, I still think I put too many windows in this build because windows were expensive, and not only were they expensive, but around this time as well, there's a little old thing, you might have heard of it, called the window tax, where you were taxed on how many windows were in your property. This did get, in like the 1800s, I think, the window tax got repealed because it was supposed to be detrimental to health. Yeah, human beings need sunlight. But because of this, homes were really, really dark. And then for the kitchen, I put so much effort into the kitchen, guys. I put so much effort in the kitchen. But obviously, I was trying to look at pictures and inspiration. I kept pausing the recording. And I paused through so much of the kitchen. I even used BB dot show hidden objects. I got my debug out, babe. And Christ on a bike. Like, I really tried. I put even little... There's a fish on the table. It stinks now, but it's there. There's even like metal tankards and everything. Oh, I did also put an oven in the kitchen, which is a bit of a stretch, but from the pictures that I've seen, there was some type of aga. We'll just pretend it's not a stretch. I beg of thee, thank you all. And then in terms of bedrooms, like I said, the guest chamber was often the better chamber. So I did kind of try and do that as if, you know, people are coming over and you're trying to really impress them with all of the money that you've got and everything. So I tried to make the bigger bedroom better. I even had like a little seating area in front of the fire because obviously fucking prison. Yeah, I did include 4-poster beds because 4-poster beds were a thing at this time. And with the curtains that drape around as well to... Number 1, keep the heat in. Number 2, keep animals out. I included ones from Realm of Magic, but I think that they might be a little bit too elaborate for the time. That's one thing I really struggled with. There just wasn't enough beds. Even honestly, when I was putting this, the servants' beds in, like for the maids and the butler, whatever they were called at that time, I was like, this just isn't looking medieval enough, you know? I mean, you need a bed with straw, babe. You need a bed with straw. But yeah, that's everything that I've got for you all in all. I hope you enjoyed the Tudor one. Like I said, I don't think every time period is going to be as popular with as many people, but I'm just going to do the ones that I feel most passionately about. We all know that Victorian is where my heart shines, you know what I mean? And I love to be a Victorian. Wouldn't love to be a Victorian. I just love the Victorian period, love learning about it. Hate the fashion style of the Victorians though. A Regency era one could be cool. I also really want to do, is it Georgian? Or Edwardian, maybe. I think it's Edwardian, where they just start to get electronics because they were crazy back then. The electrical fires that would kill them. Oof. Anyway, that is everything that I have for you today. I love you all so much. If you want to check out the 1970s one, I'll leave it in the end so you can click on it. I've also included some pictures that you will see in a second. I love you all. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, bitch.